Experience Life, what is up? It is good to see you and want to welcome those of you watching at church online at our downtown campus or our Amarillo campus. We are pumped that you're joining us right now as well. And we've been in the middle of a series called Breaking Up a Fight. And here's what we've been saying so far, that we're great at getting into fights, but we're not so good at breaking them up or staying out of fights. And so we've been looking at what James, the brother of Jesus, had to say and has to say to us about breaking up a fight and staying out of a fight. And if you've missed any part of this series, I want to challenge you, go online to our website, experiencelifenow.com, and you can get caught up. You can check out any of the messages that you've missed. Well, we're going to keep going in James chapter 4. So if you have a Bible, you can go ahead and turn there, James chapter 4. Well, about a year ago, I was traveling to our Amarillo campus. And so I'm headed north on I-27, and I'm just thanking Jesus for the speed limit increase. I don't know about you, but man, that was great news to me when the speed limit went from 70 to 75, because that means you can go like 80 to 85. I was going 75. I promise I was going 75. So I'm going the speed limit. I'm going down the highway, and I see something in the distance. Like I see something in the middle of the highway, and I'm like, what's going on? I can't really see it. So as I get closer and closer, I start to slow down because there is literally a fight taking place in the middle of I-27. Like two dudes throwing down a fist fight in the middle of the highway. And so I'm freaking out. Like I'm slowing down and like veering off the road, like watching this thing, because these guys are getting after it. They're tackling each other. I'm not like in the lanes, okay, where the cars are coming and driving, 85 miles an hour, right? And so I'm like, what do I do? So I call the police, and I'm talking with this dispatcher, and I'm telling her, hey, these guys are fighting in the middle of the highway. And she's like, oh, you mean on the access road? No, not on the access road, like in the middle of the highway. And she's like, you mean on the grass, like on the side of the highway? No, ma'am, they are on the pavement, like in the lanes where people are driving fast. They're gonna cause a wreck. And so she's like, okay, we'll send somebody out to pick them up. And so I keep driving. And have you ever been by yourself and you just start awkwardly like laughing to yourself? Like no one's there, but you just can't stop laughing. Well, that was me. I just started like, what did I just experience? Like I've never seen anything like this before. And so I just started laughing, and I couldn't stop laughing because I couldn't stop thinking about like, how did this fight start? You're driving along on the highway, and these two what do? You're arguing, and then you just start hitting each other like while you're driving, and then he slams on his brakes, like, let's take this outside. So you go on the interstate to get into a fight? Like it doesn't make any sense. So I'm laughing to myself, and then I start thinking about like, well, what happens after they're done? Like you still have to get back in the car and come home. It's not like you could just leave the guy there. Maybe he did. Maybe he left him there on the side of the road, all bloody and bruised. I don't know. But I just started thinking about that. And then I started laughing because I thought, well, what if they get done with the fight and they get back in the car and I can see two dudes doing this? Like, okay, we cool, all right? Yeah, we're cool. Okay, so let's go. Guys can do that, okay? Girls, not so much. My understanding of girl fights are that they can last for eternity. They don't ever end. And so, but what I haven't told you about this fight yet was that there was someone else involved. There was a girl involved. And so I'm thinking, like I'm just guessing, maybe they were fighting over this girl. Now, I want to remind you that all three people in this story are adults, okay? They are adults. And so they're not acting like adults though, because this girl, instead, you would think a rational adult seeing two guys fight in the middle of the interstate would be trying to break them up and get them off the highway. But no, that's not what she was doing, okay? She was doing this as I drove by, encouraging this fight, like egging it on, like pushing them to get into a fight. She was making it worse. She wasn't helping a thing. But she's an adult. And so I couldn't understand any of it. But here's what it made me realize as we've been in this series is that there is someone else that's in our fights, and that James is telling this group of guys, they're trying to take over power and control, and they're wanting to be the teachers in this church here, in James is where we're at. And James is gonna tell these guys, he's gonna tell us, listen, there's someone else involved in your fight. Like there's someone else in the background. There's a third party involved in your fight that's in the background pushing you and encouraging you and egging your fight on, making it worse. You might think, well, who is it? And I'm sure James's readers, these guys were thinking, well, who? I mean, who else is involved in the fight? Well, we're going to find out. James chapter 4, we're going to look in verse 6 and 7. And if you don't have a Bible, if it's not in a translation you understand very well, at all of our campuses, we've got free Bibles for you. They say Experience Life on the front of them. They're in the lobby. You can grab one on us. It's free. But we'll also have the verses on the screen here with me as well. So let's go. James chapter 4, verse 6 and 7. Let's see who this third person is. So James is talking about God here. He says, but he, God, gives us even more grace to stand against such evil desires. As the scriptures say, God opposes the proud, but favors the humble. So humble yourselves before God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Did you catch that? James just told this group, resist the devil. Like, in other words, the devil is the one in the background. He's the third party. He's the one that's pushing you and encouraging you and egging this fight on and making it worse. So James is basically telling these guys, they think they're wanting to be in control. They're wanting to be leaders. They're wanting to be the teachers. And James is actually telling them, listen, guys, you're following the leadership of the devil. Like, that's who you're following. That's whose influence you're under right now. Because you're in a fight, James says you're following the leadership of the devil. Now, I know some of you are here and you're new to this whole church thing. Maybe you haven't been to church before. Maybe this is your first time back in a while. Maybe you don't believe in God. And so a lot of people think that the devil is just kind of this cartoon character that in his red leotard with a pitchfork sits on your shoulders, just a bad conscience. It's kind of encourages you to do bad things. Well, the devil is not a mythical character in a story. You need to remember that we're hearing right now from James, who's the brother of Jesus. So he's a pretty credible and reliable source. And the Bible teaches us, all throughout the Bible, that the devil was originally an angel in heaven that was serving God, but he picked a fight with God. You see, the devil is the author of fights. He picked a fight with God before you and I ever got into a fight. So he picks a fight with God, and the reason is because he wants to be in control. Like, he wants to be above God. He wants to be in place of God. And so he picks a fight with God. Well, God kicks him out of heaven forever. And ever since, the devil has been picking a fight, has been waging war against God. And so here's what the Bible says about the devil. The devil is prowling around like a lion, looking for people to destroy. Looking for people to, the Bible says, devour, to take out. Jesus said this about the devil. The devil comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And James is saying, he's telling this group, you're following him. You're following the devil, the one who comes to steal, kill, and destroy, the one that prowls around like a lion, looking for people to devour. You see, the devil's trying to destroy people's lives, destroy your relationships, and he's trying to take as many people with him to hell as he can possibly take. And so James is saying, when you follow your evil desires, when you give into your pride, when you get into a fight, you are following the leadership, the influence of the devil. He's the one in the background. He's the one that's telling you and whispering into your ear and stroking your pride and pushing you and encouraging you to stay in a fight or to get into that fight. And not only that, James goes on to say, God is opposed to you because God opposes the proud. Now, I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound like a very good place to be. Like, I don't want to be opposed to God. I don't want God to be opposed to me. That doesn't sound good. It doesn't sound like a smart place to be in, like God being opposed to me. But that's what James is saying. Listen, guys, by the way that you're acting, it shows that pride is in your heart. And so God is opposed to you because of the way that you're acting. Now, here's what pride basically is. Pride just means to elevate yourself above others. Like, you're number one, you're most important. It's all about you and what you need and what you want and what's right to you and what's mine. And that's why pride often leads to getting into a fight, because it's all about you. And God sees our pride as the exact same way. When he sees pride in our hearts, it's us elevating ourselves above him, like saying, God, we don't need you. We don't need your help. And putting ourselves in the place of God, like saying, I'm good on my own. I'm fine on my own. I know everything and I don't need your help. And so God sees our pride as elevating ourselves above him, which is what the devil did. That's what the devil did to God. That's how the devil picked a fight with God. The source of it was pride, wanting to be above God. And so here's the thing you need to know. When you're in a fight, you're not just fighting against your spouse or your friend or your coworker. You're fighting against God. You are against God, and God is against you, like he's not on your side. And so if you're like me, you're thinking, well, if he's not on my side, like whose team is he on? Because I want God on my team. I want him on my side. Well, James tells us in James 4, God opposes the proud, but he favors who? The humble. God favors the humble. Like he's on the side of the humble. And so James is saying, listen, guys, instead of giving into your evil desires, instead of giving into your pride, instead of following the leadership and the influence of the devil, instead of doing that, humble yourself and God will give you the grace to resist the devil, to resist that temptation to get into a fight, to resist those evil desires. Humble yourself and God will give you grace, supernatural help, so that you can resist the devil's influence, so that you can resist your pride and resist those evil desires to get into a fight. But here's all that means, to humble yourself. Here's all it means. It means acknowledging your pride, acknowledging, God, I can't do this on my own. I need your help. I don't know everything. But you do. I can't do this, but you can. And so, God, I need your help. Help me. That's what it looks like to humble yourself. But when you're prideful, you think you know everything. You think you've got it. You don't need God's help. And when you think like that and act like that, the devil has you right where he wants you. I'm going to say that again because you need to remember that. When you're prideful and you think you know everything and you're doing everything on your own and you're in a fight and you don't want to listen to anything that anybody has to say, what God has to say, the devil has you right where he wants you. That's where he's going to attack you, and that's where he's going to come and destroy and ruin and take you down with him. The devil has you right where he wants you. When you're acting out of your pride in a fight. And so my challenge for you today is this. If you want the devil to run from you, like you want to resist his leadership, you want to resist his influence in your life, you want to resist those evil desires, you want to resist your pride, here's what James is telling us. He says, humble yourself, and God will give you the grace to resist the devil's temptation to fight. That's the big idea from the verses that we're reading today. Humble yourself. And God will give you grace to help you resist the devil's influence, to help you resist your pride, to help you resist those evil desires. When you humble yourself, God comes to the rescue. He comes with supernatural help. I have a friend, his name's Greg McClanahan, and Greg is the founder and leader of Harvest Evangelistic Association. It's a ministry, worldwide missions organization that we support as a church. It's one of our foreign mission partners, so we give financially to them. We send teams on mission trips with them. And Greg has been one of my friends since I was 18 years old in high school, and he's been one of the biggest influences in my life. He's been a mentor to me. And many years ago, Greg was in their van that they used to drive. They're based in Chiapas, Mexico. It's where their World Operations Center is. And many years ago, he was driving, and a girl ran into him. They got in a wreck. And so they get out of the car, and this girl is just sobbing, crying, because she knew it was her fault. But here's the thing. In Chiapas, Mexico, no matter whose fault it is, it's both people's fault. And so everyone's responsible for their own damages. You both get in trouble. There's a fine to be paid for both parties. It doesn't matter whose fault it is. You're both responsible. And so this girl's crying because she knows she's going to get in trouble. She knows she's got a fine to pay. She knows she's going to have to fix the damages on her car, and really she just doesn't have the money. And so in this moment, Greg has a choice to make. He can give into his pride. He can give into his evil desires and begin to claim what's rightfully his and say, you were wrong. It was your fault. You owe me the damages for my car. You're supposed to fix my car. But God gave Greg the grace to tell this girl that not only would he pay for the damages to his car, but he would pay for the damages to her car as well. This girl ends up being the sister to the secretary of the president of the city in San Cristobal, Chiapas. And she goes and tells her sister, who's the secretary to the president, all that Greg did for her. And then the sister tells the president all that Greg in this ministry had done for her sister. Well, it just so happens that this wreck took place during a time where there were some men on the city council that were trying to illegally take away, steal the land that belonged to Harvest Evangelistic Association, where they were going to build their World Operations Center. They were trying to take it away, to steal it so they could profit off of it. And so they were debating this. At the same time, this wreck took place, and this girl started to tell the president all that was going on. And so the president began to defend Greg in this fight with the city council. The president began to defend their organization, saying, you can't take away their land. That's wrong. You're stealing it. And the whole time, Greg and their ministry are praying for God's help, for God's favor in the city council so that their land wouldn't be taken away. So it comes to the day of the vote. And Greg and their staff are praying. They're asking for God's help. They're asking for his favor. And it comes to the day of the vote, and the men who were trying, on the city council that were trying to take away the land, got so sick they ended up in the hospital. Now, Greg says, God, we weren't praying for that. I mean, that's not what we wanted. We weren't wanting them to get so sick that, they're going to be in the hospital. But the day of the vote comes, these guys can't show up. And so the city council votes. They still have a quorum, I guess. And so they vote, and they vote in favor of the ministry so that they could keep their land. But you see, the devil was tempting Greg in that moment of the wreck to get into a fight that could have actually cost him not just the damages on his car, but the land that was theirs for their World Operations Center. But instead, God gave Greg the grace to humble himself, to not get into a fight, to not claim what was rightfully his. God gave him the grace to pay for her car as well. And God took a situation that was meant for evil, that the devil meant for evil, and he turned the whole thing around and used the wreck in that situation for their good. And God can do the same thing in your life too. God can take your fight, and by his grace, he can turn everything around. It's not too late. One of our prayers in this series has been for a lot of different relationships, but one in particular, probably more so than the other ones, has been for married couples. That married couples would come back together, that they would reconcile, that they would drop the fight that they've been in. They would humble themselves and receive grace from God to resist the devil's influence, to resist his leadership. Because the devil is wanting married couples to get into a fight and stay in a fight. So you may have thought you were just fighting with your spouse or your friend or your coworker, but James is saying no, there's another party involved. There's someone in the background that's been pushing you into a fight. There's someone in the background that's been encouraging you and stroking your pride to get into this fight so that he can ruin you and destroy your marriage, destroy your relationship. And James is saying, listen, the only way you're going to get out of it is if God gives you the grace to humble yourself and resist the devil's influence. And it's not too late. Doesn't matter how bad the fight is. Doesn't matter how long it's been going on. Doesn't matter if you've both walked away from the table for good. It is never too late for God. You see, James was writing to a group of people that were trying to take over the leadership and the teaching in this church. They were being influenced by the devil. And James is telling even this group, guys, humble yourself and receive God's grace to resist the devil. You see, it's never too late. And here's why it's never too late. It's because God's grace is greater than your fight. God's grace is greater than the devil's influence. God's grace is greater than your pride, greater than your evil desires. God's grace is greater than whatever it is that you're going through. It's greater, and it's never too late for God to take your situation, to take your fight, and to turn it completely around. That's how great, that's how powerful God's grace is. And so at all of our campuses, our bands are going to come back and lead us in some more songs. And here's what I want your prayer to be. God, give me the grace to resist the devil's influence in my life to get into a fight. Acknowledge your pride, admit your pride, and begin to say, God, I can't do this without you. I need your help. I don't know everything, but you do. You know everything. And trust and believe that it's not too late. You can still receive the grace from God to resist the devil. You can still receive grace from God to get out of your fight. But you can't do it on your own. And so I want to challenge you as we sing to pray and to ask for God's great grace. God, we thank you for your word. And God, how it encourages us that your grace is so amazing, it is so great. God, it can break up the worst fight. Your grace is so much greater than even the devil's influence. God, that your grace can enable us to resist him. Your grace can enable us not to resist him so that he runs from us, so that he flees from us. God, your grace is greater than our sin. It's greater than our pride. And so, God, I pray that you would fill this place in every one of our campuses with your grace. And that as we sing together right now, God, that every person would experience the power of your grace in the way that it sets us free from the devil. It sets us free from our sin. It sets us free from our pride. God, fill this place with your great grace. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thanks for checking out one of our messages today. For more information about our church or to watch other messages, you can go to our website at experiencelife.now.com. Let us know if we can serve you in any way, and we hope to see you real soon.